Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. Let me start off by sharing a little story. I remember it was August of 1980, dating myself here. But for those who don't know, I had the wonderful opportunity to play college football at a little school in Beloit, Wisconsin, Beloit College. And I remember my dad dropping me off, my dad and my sister. And I grew up about 8 hours from Beloit, Wisconsin, about 8 hours north of there. And I showed up on campus. I didn't know anybody. A lot of people go off to school and they know who their roommates are now. My kids knew who their roommates were. They knew a lot of people who were there. There was nobody within 4 counties of where I grew up. I mean, I was totally alone. I was totally heartbroken, totally homesick from the word go. Here I am. I'm this 18-year-old macho college football player, bawling my eyes out as my dad and my sister drive away. And I remember what changed it all, and it didn't take long, but it was once I started to meet the guys, I was in a community, and it's just the power of the community. And I remember like 3 days later, it's like I'd known these guys forever. And yeah, there were still aspects of being homesick. You know, you got to do your own laundry when you're off at college, things like that. The food doesn't magically appear. You just can't eat 24 hours a day. But that community made all the difference. And that's a great segue to today's guest. I have on with me today, Pat Miller, and we'll get a little more into his story. But he's the founder and host of the Idea Collective Incubator for small business owners. And he has an expertise in community building, audience targeting, and creating events. And so I met him about 3 months ago, and well, more than that, and said, I've got to get you on the podcast. You're out there doing things that I'm doing, but it kind of in a different in a different venue or a different angle on it. So, Pat, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Frank. I absolutely felt your story. I felt and saw your parents driving away and felt that helplessness that you felt on your first day of college. I've been there, man. I know what that feels like.
Well, I guess the thing I will bring out as well, just so people know, Pat's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is not a big deal, but he's a huge Bears fan. And so that's part of the reason I hit it off, because here I am, I'm a Michigan Wolverine fan living in Columbus, Ohio. And I feel your pain. Well, yours is a couple times a year. Mine's only one time a year. You have to deal with it a couple times a year. But anyhow, I guess quickly share your story. Let's talk about community building, the things you're doing. It's really kind of neat.
I spent a career as a broadcaster, so my entire life being on the air and building radio stations was designed to put out something that brought people together and made them feel like they were in a community of music fans or sports fans or folks that had a particular political point of view, but basically bringing together like-minded people around subject matter. That's really what radio is all about. When I left the industry, I started consulting small businesses, and I realized, wow, here's an audience full of people, but there really isn't a community out there for them. There's a lot of activities and a lot of business opportunities, but where do they go to find that sense of belonging? Going back to your college football story, when people start their own small business on their first day, they look around and see all the other business owners that have their act together, and they've all know what they're selling, and they're making a bunch of money, and they're smarter and they're better, and there's no one to ask for help, and you're all alone.
Yeah.
And that is the essence of what I'm trying to fix.
Oh, that is such a parallel to my experience. Because when you go off to work for somebody, there are people there. You know, you have a half a day with HR, you're being introduced around, and it's like, I don't know these people. But you quickly have a community. But when you're starting out on your own in a business, I I remember that too. Now, I wasn't crying every day, but it was lonely, right?
Absolutely, it's lonely. And the difference is when you go work at a company, everyone else or most of the people in the company will become successful if and only if you're successful. But
Right.
when you start your own thing, nobody cares. Yet
Yeah.
it's everything to you. You only eat what you kill. So you have to be successful or else. But no one around you is invested in your success as well. That's what the power of community can provide.
What are some challenges you have faced in building community?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be in a community, right? I show up at college and hey, here's the community, right? But that's different than actually having to create the community. And
When you
people
create it, yeah. When you create it from scratch, the hardest thing to do is put a vision out there and have people rally around it. Because folks on the fringe will check it out and either try and make it their own, or they have to try it and realize it's not for them and then leave. So the hardest thing about creating a community, especially for small business owners, I think, is to have a really clear vision of what you're trying to do and then invite people to try it because it's not for everyone. And then when they're in the community, enforce that vision and really make sure you're delivering on what you say that you're going to deliver. Because there are ways to get networking leads through networking groups or coaching through coaching programs or referrals through a BNI style group. Fine, all that stuff exists. But if you're going to put out there something as squishy as a place for small business belonging, a place where small business owners who are all on the same journey, all living the same lifestyle, are going to set down their competition and come in and collaborate. I mean, that's a very squishy vision. So you have to make sure that you put it out there and you pay off on it. So I think that's the hardest thing that I've run into is trying to communicate what we're building, holding the community true to those values, and making sure that the people that come in are starting to embrace it and start living those values as well.
That reminds me of a story. AmSpirit Business Connections we're BNI-like type groups. I say we're similar, not the same. But I remember starting that first group and having a core of people sitting around and painting a vision for them as to what this would be. And I was really nervous, probably like you were really nervous. You can never articulate totally what's in your head. You're trying to articulate something that's months, if not years down the line, and the success, and people sitting around can't see that. But I had a gentleman who happened to be at that meeting, and it couldn't have been scripted any better. His name was Todd. I forget his last name, but he was an attorney. And he turned to everybody who's sitting around they were just like, okay, yeah, what? And he pulled out his checkbook and he said, I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I was in Columbus at the time, still am. He pulled out his checkbook and what he said at first was, I'm from Toledo. I just moved down here. I've been in these groups. I've heard of these groups. These things work really, really well. He pulled out his checkbook, slammed it down on the table and said, I'm in. I mean, it couldn't have been scripted any better. I don't know if you have a moment like that where it's like somebody, you have that first follower, right? Yeah. You're the leader. If nobody follows, that's a lonely walk.
It absolutely is. There's so much power in that first follower because the journey is to go from the first follower to your 1,000 raving fans. By the time you get to 1,000 raving fans, you're minted. You're off to the races.
Right.
But from 1 to 1,000 is that scary, lonely road where you're trying to share your vision with people. So my story with that, when the pandemic hit, it was March 18th, the NBA canceled and Tom Hanks got COVID. That was the day that both men and women in the U.S. said, what is going on? Something is up. Schools canceled, networking support fizzled. No one knew what was going on. The next day, I went on Zoom and started a show called Small Business Rally Points. I made it up. Hey, everyone, we're going to get together on Zoom, and if you're hanging around me, we're not going to get negative. We're not going to lose our businesses. We're going to work together to get through this. Because if you think back to March of 20, no one knew what was going on. Like, is this a killer virus? Is everyone going to die? Are we all going out of business?
Right.
So we did that show every single day. Fast forward about 60 days, and someone who had been coming to the show consistently, they said, I'm not sure if you know it, but you've built a community here. That was the aha moment. So we went from a daily Zoom show to a mighty network and invited people to become members of our premium community. And that conversion from fans to community is really a big issue. And it's something that a lot of people who use the word community, I think, I don't want to say they don't understand because I don't want to be disrespectful, but they might not be super clear on the difference between an audience and a community, because there's a gigantic difference. And the difference is simply, if you're really good at speaking or writing or creating art or whatever you do to have people be interested in you, they are an audience of yours unless their experience is better by talking to the other audience members. So people that build a following on social media, or people that have a really popular podcast, or they're really great public speakers, that's great. But if their experience isn't enhanced by collaborating, getting to know, working with, celebrating with the other people that are also your fans, then you have an audience, not a community. And it's a word that is oftentimes misused. And it's one that I've learned the hard way. There's a huge difference.
Right. Well, what I have found, I have been involved in what is now AmSpirit Business Connections in one form or another since February of 1995. So I've got a little more runway behind me, I guess. What I found with respect to the pandemic is that there were a lot of people who said, hey, I can do this. I can build a community, or I can build an audience. And I am not close enough to know really what it is that they have. I think to a degree, a lot of them just have audiences because they want to use it as a platform to share what they have to say, which that's an audience. But there have been people who've come to me and been really concerned about the whole notion of, wow, everybody's creating a community. And I've said, well, that's because the barrier to creating a community, the barrier to entry is really, really small. It's really small. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's just true.
That's true.
It's sustaining it. That'll be the challenge. That will be the challenge. And we won't know for maybe another couple of years as to who falls away and says, yeah, I don't want to put the time in this anymore. Feels like you've kind of moved past that.
I think we're getting to proof of concept. It's not unlike opening a restaurant. Anyone can open a restaurant, but very few survive because it's a ton of work and your hourly wage is incredibly low until it's not.
Yeah.
Because to keep a community running, especially if you have no or few staff members, it just takes so much work for communicating the vision, for creating content, for engaging with all your members, and then all of the work that goes into finding new members, sharing the vision, inviting them to test it out, dealing with churn, people that come in and leave. All of those things go into the job of a community builder. All the while, you can't deviate from what makes the community what it is. So I think you're right. There are a lot of people that say they want it, and it's right now super trendy to talk about community. If you look into the next frontier of, I don't want to call it capitalism, but business, the Web3 people, they're all talking about how their NFTs are creating community and how the fact that they're on blockchain is creating community. And some of them are and some of them aren't. But everyone wants one, because if you can get a community of like-minded people that are willing to work with one another, it's magic. As you've experienced, it's absolute magic. When people join AmSpirit, they're no longer disconnected. They're now part of a family. And that is very rare, especially in business, to join a group of people that care about your success, that aren't trying to take thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from you, or trying to sell you stuff all the time. And that's, I think, where we have a shared vision of business is better when you find your people. And it makes it so much easier and frankly, so much more fun when you have people to celebrate with, see people to collaborate with, people to support you when you don't know what you're doing. It's really a game changer for my audience and my group. We're talking solopreneurs and people that are just now starting to scale. So my group is for really small businesses. And that is an extremely lonely road, and something that our community has helped a little bit with.
Well, I think I'll speak for myself. I underestimated the power of community, because when the lockdown came down, I mean, you started recording, I think you hopped on Zoom March 18th, I think you
March
said.
18th, yeah.
Yeah. I remember the governor of Ohio, I want to say it was March 12th, hey, we got a lockdown going. I didn't know what it meant. I have an office. I come to my office. I plan to still come to my office just for a little bit of sanity. But I remember there was a moment, probably about 3 a.m. on the 13th, saying, what does this mean? Oh my gosh, I have a community-based, it's largely face-to-face. Yeah, I knew of Zoom, but people weren't talking Zoom. They weren't using it like they use it now. And I just braced myself for a massive contraction in the organization. And I was shocked, because that was anything but what happened.
Yeah.
And kudos to Small Business America, because they're like, hey, we aren't waiting for the government to take care of us. We got to figure this out. And they did. And I got kind of swept up in it, and I was, their leader, if you will. And just like, okay, I don't have time to be afraid. I just have got to lead. But back to the whole notion of community, it really reminds people, and people starting communities, it reminds me a lot of people who start podcasts. And you probably deal with a lot of these people as well. It's easy to say, hey, I'm going to have a podcast. Got a microphone. I mean, what's the barrier to starting a podcast? Excuse me. You need a microphone. Okay, decent one's $100, right? You can scale down from there. An Audacity account, which is free. Okay, you're going to sign up on a platform like Libsyn or whatever else is out there, and there are others, which you can get a free account, or you can get one for $7 or something like that a month. So it's really kind of small, and like, hey, I'm going to do it, and then they end up doing 7 episodes because they just don't have anything else to say. And I think that's what happened to a lot of communities. It's like, yeah, this is great. We're all coming together. And then you kind of run out of, okay, why are we coming together? Because that's the task you have, is continually trying to keep it fresh, right?
And creating content that keeps them engaged.
Yep.
And there's a transition of value. When you create a product for someone, they will buy it if they see what's in it for me. When you have a community, they will stay in the community if they see what's in it for us. And there's a difference. Yeah. So as a member of the Idea Collective, I'm in this group so we can all succeed. All of our road is made easier if we work together and collaborate. If you're building a community that has a bunch of content for personal benefit, those people are going to flame out. Those are the ones that are going to quit, because unless you're just a zealot and you're willing to work 24/7 for free, you're really going to run out of that cost-benefit opportunity rather quickly, because it's tough to scale and it's tough to keep people engaged, and it won't last long-term if they don't see the community's vision for one another and how everyone succeeds when they work together.
Yeah. No, I think that's you're spot on, with characterization of a community, and some don't last. They just don't.
So let me ask you, like, you're 10, 15 years, more than that, ahead of where I'm at. And if someone's listened this far into the podcast right now, they're probably interested in growing the community they have or starting one of their own. So I want to ask you, what were some of the things that helped you go from your bright idea and vision to taking it all around the country with a zillion members? Like, can you think back to some of those aha moments you had that helped you share the vision for what you were doing, so someone that's listening might be able to say, oh, I can do that with the community that I'm trying to build?
Yeah. I think the simple answer, Pat, is never stop caring about the members. And I know that sounds very cliche, but it's so true. Just finding ways to help them and looking and seeing, okay, why are people struggling? In our organization, yours is a much broader community as far as content goes. We're mainly networking and referrals. And I know why people leave. They leave because of referrals or lack thereof. And so then you have to kind of peel away at, okay, why are they not getting referrals? And I'm convinced it's three things. One, they don't have a relationship. People don't know, like, and trust them. They expect it too soon, or they're a jerk, right? One of those things. I have other words for it, but that's the reality. I mean, they're not likable, right? Yeah. They can't leave their politics at the door, right? Can't leave their religion at the door. And both those things are okay, but they just don't always mix with business. But that's the first thing. But even when people have relationships, they need to create amongst the people around them a sense of recognizing opportunities. I could think you're the greatest guy in the world, and if I don't know how to help you, I can't. And so a lot of effort has to be put into that. And then the third thing, which is really less of a problem, once I understand what it is you do, I need you to help me to do a good job of explaining it to other people so I can make the connection. Hey, Bob, you really need to talk to Pat because of, and be comfortable with that and using terms that you would use. But anyhow, back to your question, I have just kind of been on this ongoing quest of just getting people to understand this and seeing that there are people out there who struggle, and you probably see it. There are people who don't. They're deathly afraid of public speaking, and I don't mean just speaking in front of other people, not standing at a podium with a group of 20 people, but just talking to a group of 10 other people. They're scared to death, and trying to coach them through those sorts of things. So that's really been the magic, is just have to keep adding value, keep helping these people. And it changes every day, and you never really feel like you've arrived. 100 times, Pat, I've thought, okay, here's the epiphany. This is it. This is the Holy Grail, and it's like, okay, I'm on the horizon, and I'm looking at another horizon. There's one more problem to solve. And that's the nature of it.
And you hit on the difference. The reason why you've been so successful is because you've got the community mindset, and that is encapsulated by what you said. Never stop caring about the members.
Yeah.
If right now you're trying to build a community about the things you have to say and what you have to teach and what's on your mind, you might not make it. Yeah. But if you wake up every day thinking, the people that have entrusted me by joining my community, how do I make their lives better today?
Yeah.
You're going to end up like you.
Well, I guess my lesson to people who are listening at this point, or to you, as far as building a community, and I'm a stickler about this. People come to me all the time. Hey, you've got a network. You've got a great network. I want to pour my product through your network, my book, my program, my whatever. And I consistently say no. I haven't even sold my own books through my network, because I'm just that firm of a believer that they aren't here to be pitched. They're here for the community, not for me to make them lambs to be led into the slaughter, right? But people will, well, no, Frank, but I'll pay you. It's like, no, my relationship with these people's worth more than the $100 you're going to pay me. I got a card from a member. It was funny, Pat, because it was my 25th year anniversary with my wife, and I got a 25-year anniversary card from this guy. I'm like, how the hell does he know it's my anniversary? You look on the front, happy anniversary, open it up, and he, happy 25th anniversary, opened it up and read it. And it wasn't a card to me and my wife. It was a card, him celebrating his 25 years in the organization, which was like, yeah, I have that hanging on the wall here. Very powerful. And his line in there, which is really funny, his name's Scott Martin. He says, I hope to be a better member for the next 25 years, which, basically, hey, I'm here. I'm sticking around. And he's probably not the oldest tenured member in the organization. So it's pretty cool. But let's switch gears. Let's talk about, things you've got on the horizon. I know you have, people can become part of the Idea Collective. You got a Facebook group. I assume there's Zoom calls. You can, fill me in on all this stuff. But I know you have a face-to-face event in Lake Geneva in November. So yeah, share about these things and certainly how people can get a hold of you.
I was pausing because I've got a barking dog. I'm sorry, Frank. I'm just giving you just a second here because it's
You
kind
know,
of bad.
well, I will keep all this in because this is a podcast, and
Oh,
I'm
love it
usually,
then.
yeah, I'm, I've had kids, I've had cars, I've had weed whackers.
I was trying to be sensitive. Well, Shadow the Idea Dog says hello.
All
All
right.
right, so here's what we have going on. Because it's a community that lives 24/7, we've always got an opportunity to support people that are ready to walk on the small business journey with other entrepreneurs. So the Idea Collective community is open all the time. But you asked about the retreat. That's the once-a-year opportunity where we all get together in person. And it's like a family reunion because we only get together once a year. So my job as the host, just like you explained with your community, is create value, create value, create value. So we're going to a 4-star resort. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin is between Chicago and Milwaukee, resort town. It's at the Grand Geneva, which is formerly Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion.
Oh,
Yes. So
yeah,
it's this giant resort, but it's
yeah.
like got that old school, like 70s vibe. Anyway, I'm bringing in Profit First speaker and author Mike Michalowicz is one of our keynotes. He comes in and he's going to do coaching with our people. So our guests are going to be able to talk to Mike and ask their small business questions, which is going to be great. We're going to have presenters on positioning, marketing, sales, operations. I mean, you name it. We're going to cover everything a small business owner would want to know. But back to the reason why we're on the planet, it's about meeting with everyone else, cementing those relationships, and really fueling your tank as you get ready for 2023. Because November is that time when you're starting to look forward and say, okay, what are we going to get done next
Yeah.
year? So all those details are at smallbizretreat.com. So if they want to look them up, I'd love to have you at the retreat. But it's one of those things that's really enhanced the community experience because we meet online, but now we get a chance to get together and see one another.
Yeah, it sounds powerful. It sounds amazing. Shout out to Mike. When the pandemic hit, one of our members, a guy by the name of Matt Ward, knows him, and he graciously gave 90 minutes of his time to just do a presentation and just said, hey, listen, I don't know, like you said, I don't know what's going on, but I can do this to help people. He was coming out with a new book, but I can do this. I can help this much, which, if that's all you can do, that's great.
Yeah.
You gave it all.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. And it was a great presentation. So your audience, your community is in for a treat. Your community is in for a treat.
Thank you.
Best way to get a hold of you.
IdeaCollectiveIncubator.com. That's the landing page that shows off everything we're doing in the group. Because you asked what's going on in the group. We're doing over 40 hours a month of custom content, 24/7 message boards, small groups, masterminds, all that stuff. Like you kind of have to see it on the website to kind of get it all. So IdeaCollectiveIncubator.com is the best way to get me.
I will put that in the show notes. I really appreciate your time today. This was great. We're going to have to get you back and we can dive into a lot of these areas in future episodes.
Yeah, I'd love it. Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me and the Idea Dog here.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.